So next question. This comes from Valery. Valery, I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly, my friend. It says, what do you think about using easy strength for grappling athletes to build strength, especially for athletes that train 5 days a week, mostly doing specific positional sparring and drills? Well, I mean, this is an easy answer. I think it's great. I think it's a great idea because you're training, like you said, 5 days a week or so, even if most of them are just like positional training, etc., which is going to tie into his next question. But I think it's great. Easy strength, for those that are watching and don't know what easy strength is, it's a program, it's a book that Pavel and Dan John put out a long time ago. And the concept is basically, not doing any more than 10 repetitions. And they give you several ways to break it up. It can be, 2 sets of 5. It could be 5 sets of 2. It could be 6 singles. It could be, three sets of 3, as long as you're not doing more than 10 repetitions. And you can train this with the deadlift. That's actually how I used easy strength when I was trying to build my deadlift the first time. When I got into barbell deadlifting in 2013, I was trying to take the SFG, not the SFG. When Strong First just became a company, and they launched their first barbell certification, the SFL. And so one of the strength requirements is to deadlift 2 times your body weight. And so at that time, I'd never really barbell deadlifted. And I think I did my training max. I went to a buddy of mine, his gym here in town, who had barbell. Like, I didn't even have barbells then. And just kind of tested my training max. I could barely pull 350, which was kind of disheartening because the certification was in like 5 weeks or less, and I had to add 50 pounds to my deadlift. And so easy strength was that. I ended up doing the Justice singles. I did Justice singles pretty much every single day for those 4 weeks, and I hit my 405. So to answer your question, highly encourage, use easy strength especially if you're training 5 days or more per week. High positive outcome, minimal physiological cost. So definitely. The second part of his question was, which this kind of ties into it, this question is also from Valery. He's asking, is there any value in endurance training for the mat? If you're already strong and filled most of the gaps and you move well, is there any value in endurance training? If there is, how would you approach this while training jiu-jitsu and strength training? Right. So again, Valery, thank you for those 2 great questions, man. Well, there is some value in, I want to, approach this a couple of different ways. There is some value in endurance training for jiu-jitsu, okay? For general physical preparedness, right? GPP. So before you can do specific endurance training, let's say jiu-jitsu, before you can really build a high capacity of endurance for jiu-jitsu, which you're going to get through the mat, before you can do that, you need to have a foundation of general physical preparedness, right? It's just like before you do dynamic and explosive movements, you need a foundation of general strength, right? You need a foundation of strength stability. You need a foundation of strength endurance. You need a foundation of a little bit of muscle building, maximum strength, see you, man. And then you get to power training, endurance training, power, endurance, etc. So endurance, like for jiu-jitsu, is kind of the same thing. You need to build a general foundation of endurance before you build on that with specific endurance, right? You got GPP, then you got SPP, specific physical preparedness, right? And that's going to be coming from jiu-jitsu. Now, if you're training jiu-jitsu less than 2 days or less per week, if you're doing jiu-jitsu 1 or 2 days a week, then I would incorporate some kind of general physical preparedness type stuff, type exercise. But because your first question is, it sounds like you're training 5 days a week, right? Mostly doing drills, and then you're doing some sparring. If you're training more than 2 days a week, you don't need endurance training for jiu-jitsu. You just don't need it because you're going to get that covered on the mat. And that's what I love about using kettlebells for strength training, because you get, like, as a consequence, like, you indirectly get general physical preparedness, endurance training with it, right? If you're working on, clean and press, you're working on swing, these are mostly strength power movements. The byproduct is, a good foundation of endurance. But it's not like you're just trying to do endurance with them. Make sense? If you're training if you're training more than 2 days per week, you don't need endurance training for jiu-jitsu. Okay? Because and a lot of guys get confused by this, or they take this, their understanding of it is just not there, right? And so you see these guys doing like HIIT training and all kinds of sport-specific training, which there's no such thing as sport-specific training. You can't do that with kettlebells and barbells. Like, it's called sport-specific for a reason. It's specific to the sport, right? But before you can do that, which is going to be for jiu-jitsu, you got to build foundation off the mat, which is general endurance. Getting your swings, get-ups, clean and press, getting that stuff in. Okay. Where I was going with this is, you have two different type of responses for endurance. You have what's called a hormonal induced response to your endurance, and then you have an exercise induced response for endurance. Okay, so hormonal induced response, this is our sympathetic nervous system, right? Fight or flight. If you're trying to peak your endurance, let's say you're training multiple days per week in jiu-jitsu, and you're trying to peak your endurance, kettlebell snatches, kettlebell swings, whatever, CrossFit, high intensity training, if you're trying to peak endurance there, it doesn't carry over to jiu-jitsu, because that's an exercise-induced response to your endurance. It's actually going to, ironically, that is a hormonal-induced response for that exercise, right? So if you're trying to, as an example, let's say you're trying to do a snatch test. You're trying to attain your first snatch test. You got to be doing snatches. That would be a hormonal-induced response for snatches. You would not try to improve your endurance for snatches by training more jiu-jitsu, right? You see? So for jiu-jitsu, you want that hormonal response. You want to be able to, your body to approach that fight or flight, and then be able to break through and work through that. Does that make sense? So in order to improve endurance for the mat, it needs to be on the mat. All right? This question came from Instagram.